Welcome to the range, everybody. I'm Ricky Bruley, and not joining me today is my sidekick, Hollywood. As you can see, I've got my mule deer buddy here joining me, filling in for him. We are so busy here at Vapor Trail that unfortunately he was unable to get away from the day-to-day operations to come and record. Thank you all for joining us. You can find the video version of this episode on our Vapor Trail YouTube channel, so please head on over and subscribe, give us a like, and hit that bell so you can be sure to be notified of everything that the range has to talk about. So this is our little segment that we like to call Shiny Objects, where we talk about what is currently grabbing our attention. What is that shiny object in our lives at this moment? Could be a new piece of gear, a good new read, a song, an upcoming hunting trip, or even just a feeling. So what is your current shiny object? Let us know, and we'll send you a little gift. We'd love to share it with the range listeners. You can shoot me an email at rick@vaportrailarchery.com. Let me know what your shiny object is. So last week, we spoke with Bigfoot, aka Ben Guttormson. He is a good friend of ours. He's a very accomplished bow hunter, and he's a Western Territory rep for OutTech and Marketing and Sales Rep Group. Last week, Ben spoke of his shiny object, and he has very exciting news about that. So we decided to have him on again today to talk about it more in detail. Welcome to the Range Podcast. I'm Ricky Bruley, and with me is Jake Hollywood Iverson. Join us at the Archery Range, where we'll tell stories from the hunt, discuss technical bow shooting tactics and gear, and pick the brains of some of the most successful people to ever shoot a bow. Whether you're about to shoot that X for the win or send an arrow at a trophy buck, this podcast is for you. The Range Podcast is brought to you by Vapor Trail Archery, makers of the best bowstrings money can buy, originators of limb-driven arrow rest technology, and innovators of Stokerized stabilizer systems. So, Ben, I don't know if you're familiar with this segment of the Range Podcast. It's one that we like to call Shiny Objects. And in this segment, we basically just like to chat quickly about what our current obsession is. What's the current shiny object in front of your face? So yeah, man, what's your current shiny object right now?
And my shiny object right now is probably antelope season that opens on the 15th.
There you go. Yeah.
Can we say that for Western hunters?
Absolutely.
That hunt some of these Western states, the 15th, and it's like the kickoff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The kickoff for the season, and it's the first tag to go live. And I can say antelope hunting taught me a lot about being patient, a lot about being when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive, and the recipe that it takes to be successful as a spot and stock hunter. I can probably say antelope is the species that has taught me the most of any species out there.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because you can hunt them from sun up to sundown. There is no evening to wait for or morning only activity. They are on their feet, on and off all day. If you can find one, you can probably screw up a stock on one. So that's, and there's some guys say there's a ratio to success, and it's like you got to stalk 15 times before you get one within bow range. And I like to eat antelope more than anything else. And what I've found is that if I put my time in before the season opens and have a pattern down, they're like a whitetail on opening day of archery. They're hitting food, they're hitting water, they're very predictable. So antelope have taught me a ton, and they've frustrated me a ton more. And now I hunt them out of a blind because I like to eat them, and I want to fill my tag.
There you go. See, I did the same thing with turkeys, and I started using a gun just because I was like, I can't, I like to eat turkey, and I want to have one every single year, But now, of course, then this year I did end up going back to the bow and taking one with the bow with a push from Nathy. But But yeah, no, man, that's cool. So when do you? I think I remember when we were talking. So you start on Tuesday, or you're headed out Tuesday?
Today is Wednesday. I start Tuesday next week.
Okay.
Nice.
Are you in Washington yet?
Yep.
So, folks, this conversation started with Ben in Oregon, and now he's in Washington. And then you're going to travel around for the next couple of days, and then you're back home Monday, and then you head out Tuesday.
Yep. Just get some last touches in with a couple of accounts. It's a new part of my territory for me this year, and I've got a lot of relationships over here from working for previous manufacturers and stuff. But it never hurts to just poke your face in, say hello, and
Dang right.
Yeah.
And they don't expect to see you. I try not to take any time. Just wanted to, when they see you in person, it's different than on the phone. So
Right.
And just for the listeners, so you are a territory rep for OutTech.
yeah, regional manager. There's a bunch of things you could call me, I guess. But yeah, so I cover multiple states for sales and service or sales and marketing agency. So
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. I've wanted to do antelope for the longest time, and maybe I will when I'm out west in a few weeks. Maybe if I get an itch, because the private land we are going to, I guess they have some on their ranch, and they don't touch them. So
There you go.
I mean, it's another couple $100, but as long as it's still over the counter, I mean, whatever. A couple hundred versus 1,000, it'd be kind of cool to try it. But
Right. For sure.
yeah, and I know it's antelope season too, Ben, because right now the amount of emails and phone calls I've had that says, I'm going on my antelope hunt next week. I need my strings. It's unreal.
Yeah,
Like,
there's plenty of business right now. I mean, the shops are super busy and everything else. So
yeah, it never fails every single year. We'll push, March, heavily for everyone to get their strings and everything, in check then, because, it's slower for everyone, and it never fails. I know there's a couple guys I'm dealing with that, yep, I'm antelope hunting, in 2 weeks. I'm like, okay, well, you had 7 months. Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's coming up quick. I'm excited, though, because it's weird saying already that in a few weeks I'll be heading out and starting to do some scouting and hunting out there. So I'm ready. I'll be ready even more when it gets to be time there, because busy season will be kicking us left, right, and center. So
Right. And I'm guessing that segues right into your shiny object. I mean, you've already been touching on it a little bit. But.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I'd say, I don't know. I'm gonna try. I could try and pick a new one, but I mean, honestly, I think the fun part of me now being in my house is figuring out what I'm gonna do for. Goodbye, Ben. He's
Bye-bye.
completely gone. He's like, screw these guys.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, it'd be the house, just because now I'm like, I don't know, I'm not like OCD, but I'm like big fan of like the organizing things. So I'm like, ooh, I got 2 pieces of pegboard up, so I'm in like the garage. I'm like, ooh, what should go there? What should go there? So now I'm just like, welcome back.
He's back.
sorry, guys.
No worries.
All good. I'm just talking. My shiny object, I think, right now is just every day when I leave work, since I'm in our house now, is going home and just figuring out how to organize the garage and the shed and where to put the archery equipment. Because
Setting up your little shop there.
Yep. I'm like, okay, I want to do some sort of workbench. I want a bow press. I want all these things, but it's hard for me because part of my generation is I want it now.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I got to wait. I got to cool down just a little bit, but I'm prepping for all this stuff. And I'm like, it'll be sweet once I finally have like a station to build arrows at home when I want. When I leave here, separate work from play, and then work on my own bow and all that stuff. Like, I'm stoked to finally be a homeowner. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's cool until
awesome.
something breaks, is what I've heard. So, I mean,
Yeah.
as soon as we move.
Welcome to the world of debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you're smart. I always used to try to talk you into getting a credit card, because I remember you were saying, oh, it's really hard for me to afford all these tags, and it's like, well, get a,
Yeah.
it, and what I guess what I'm referring to is like the tags that you have to pay for up front, whether you get them or not.
Wyoming.
And so it's like, well, that's what credit cards are for, right?
Yep.
Because then you can, recover your money. But either way, you got a pretty good head on your shoulders when it comes to that, and yeah, just play it smart. And when things, yeah, except for when things break, that does suck. But if you're smart about it and you got money set aside
Yeah.
for that in case, then it's not that big a deal.
No.
It's not so stressful, because it is unfortunate though that home appliances are not near as sturdy as they used to be. I mean, my AC unit is the original, and my house was built in 1978.
Jeez.
And granted, it's a energy sucker. You know what I mean? My electric bill in the summer is insane because
Running off diesel.
because of the AC, but it's still kicking. And there's no AC unit you buy now that's gonna last you that long. No way.
No, it's.
But
I don't know. I'll be learning a lot in the next couple months. I know that.
Mm-hmm.
First one I'm waiting for is the irrigation bill. The water bill, because I have in-ground sprinklers, and the previous owner was setting all those zones to a good chunk of time, and I'm like, oh my Lord, I can't wait to see this come through.
for grass.
Got to make it look good if you're going to sell it, right?
Oh yeah, I know. I could tell that's exactly what he was doing. Because now
Yeah.
that I took the time down a little bit, yeah, the grass is turning a little bit. So now I'm like, damn it, trying to
Nope.
play.
Nobody's gonna want to buy my house. My grass is all dead. I should say my creeping Charlie's all dead right now.
Just spread some rye, you'll be good.
A lot of quack grass coming up now that we finally started to get some rain. But
What is Rick's shiny object now?
so mine is right now. So I've got a week off coming up here in the first week of September. I took that week off with the hopes of drawing a bear tag in Minnesota, which I did not. So I'm just going to go and kick it in the boundary waters for a week and just fish. And in retrospect, I wish I would have picked like maybe closer to the middle of September, because then I could have brought my bow with me and had a deer tag in my pocket and hunted ducks and done some of that stuff. But so now I'm going in too early where I can't do any of that, but I can still fish and whatever, just run around and be by myself for a week.
For those that don't know us locally, Rick and I, we have a fairly heavy hand around here, and frick you for leaving, man. 1 week in first week of September.
Yeah, I know.
Come on, man.
I know,
No,
which
it's
is
all great. I've done it to you guys the last like 3 years, so I can't say it.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I've never been antelope hunting either, because to go out in the middle of August, being here for 17 years, it's like August is just I'd feel bad leaving. I feel bad enough leaving in September, but yeah, mid-August, and even then, back then, no way Steve was going to give me that time off. If I was going to try to go on a hunt, I'd be coming back to no job. So
around these parts, PTO gets pretty slim in August and September.
Yeah.
End of September, maybe a little easier, but yeah, the last 3 years, like I was saying, I was on muskie fishing trips, so I can't say too much in the middle of August. So
right.
I mean, payback.
For sure. We'll be right back.
New for the 2023 archery season is our brand new online arrow customizer. Build your Victory or Easton arrows with multiple vane options, configurations, and custom arrow wraps in a large array of designs and colors. Spine indexing and expedited build options are also available, so you can get back out in the field and flinging in style. Check out the Vapor Trail Arrow Customizer at www.vaportrailarchery.com/arrow customizer.
Ben, what's up, man? You're back again in your home office. Appreciate you coming by.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
No.
How are you doing today?
Good, man. Man, it's busy right now. I tell you,
Right.
Both shops are busy, so
Right.
it's good, but it just means that the season's close.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
The next phase of the season, I guess, for me. So.
Yeah, we're nuts here right now. It's just crazy, which is the reason why Hollywood isn't here. And I've got my mule deer cohort here on the show today. Uh,
I recognize him.
hey, yeah, he's that's the buck that we packed out on Thanksgiving Day.
Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. We talked a little bit about that one in the previous episode. But yeah, so that was a really cool memory. I'll never forget that. In fact, one of the things we didn't talk about is that was a trip that we took with our buddy Cal as well, and we ended up going 3 for 3 on that trip.
Yeah.
You shot yours first, then Cal shot his, and then I shot mine, and they were all within what it was like 4 or 5 days. I think we were out there.
Yeah. I actually have that buck in the room over here too. I should maybe at the end I'll grab him and come out. But I remember that buck specifically, the one I shot. I was just dogging the herd, just following them, and that was the one where I crept up on him and he heard me coming, and he came back. He thought I was another buck. He was going to fight me, and here
Yep.
I am, full draw behind that Badland mound, and I
Mm-hmm.
shot him at like 18 yards.
Yep.
So that was pretty cool for sure.
Yeah, and today I was going through photos, and you had sent me some spotting scope photos of that buck. I'm pretty sure it's that buck.
Mm-hmm.
Previous to all of that, so that's pretty cool. So we've got a bunch of content that we can
Cool.
show for that. But yeah, so you have some pretty exciting news regarding this week's shiny object. You had talked a little bit last week about how you were excited about the big opener for pronghorn antelope. And so why don't you spill the beans for all the range listeners of that story you've
No,
got?
I was excited last week. I think I was on the road when we filmed. I think it was like the first week of or just getting into the first or second week of August, and the opener was the 15th. And I was out on the West Coast, and made a trip home, kind of regrouped, got all my stuff, and I'm a I'm a big proponent of whatever works best for antelope. Antelope are incredibly challenging to hunt, spot, and stalk. Anybody that's done it knows that, and they're one of my favorite animals to eat. So I will do whatever I need to to kill. If it's sit in a blind, I'll sit in a blind. If it's sit a fence crossing or an ambush location, I'll do that. And this year we've had a really wet year, so I went and checked cameras, and my cameras were, I mean, I'd have antelope, but it seems like the cattle rotations were all different this year because of how wet it'd been, and
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't getting antelope in my normal spots. And I've got half a dozen locations where I'm always checking, and so kind of threw the blind game out the window for me. But this year I was afforded a little bit more time. I didn't have to attend any fall market or spring market shows that happen
Mm-hmm.
in the fall.
Okay.
So I was able to take my time a little bit more, and I had found one buck in particular during scouting this year that really I took a liking to, and that just so happens to be who I focused on, and after a couple of days, I actually was able to be successful.
That's awesome.
I It was like probably the funnest pronghorn hunt I've had for a number of years because it's always a busy time this time of year, but with,
Right.
with no fall shows needed. And I was able to maintain, dealer needs and stuff like that through the first few days of the season, but I was able to get it done. And I did it, just knowing the terrain and kind of letting the animal teach his pattern, and, more observation than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't blow any stalks on him. I did bump him once when I was just kind of walking through the ground that he frequented, trying to learn it. There was about a mile and a half long fence that I walked the entire length of that fence to check for specific antelope crossings, and I found that crossing that he frequented, and then I found another one that he used, and I saw him use that one. I set some cameras up, and then after a couple days and a couple of frustrating situations, I had this buck was pretty visible by the road, and he came in and was just like to be right off the road. There was some water, there was good green lush stuff that he could eat, and
Mm-hmm.
that was his favorite spot, but it was very visible. So other hunters came into play a couple times. I had a couple guys kind of move in when I was, sitting on him waiting for him to make a mistake, which is kind of my style. I let the animal make a mistake instead of me forcing a mistake that I make.
Right. Yeah.
And they blew him out of the country, and I was like, well, I hope he comes back. And it would take me, sometimes all day, 12, 14, 16 hours to find him again. But he ended up turning up in the same general vicinity every time he got blew out. And I had him blown out 3 different times by 3 different situations with other hunters moving in, just kind of trying to get something to stick, trying to get lucky, whatever you want to call it. And but what it did is it showed me his pattern, and ultimately I capitalized on that pattern. And he's a pretty good buck for Montana for what we see up here. I killed one several years ago. I don't know, probably 6 or 7 years ago in the same area that was also very big. And it actually is a spitting image of that buck.
Oh, really?
Very big prongs. And I'll have to share photos of that buck too. And
Yeah.
less than a mile as the crow flies, and they cross some of the same ground. Like they inhabited some of the same ground. And I hunted that buck until the day before the firearm season for antelope opened, which is like the first weekend in October, usually in Montana.
Okay.
I killed him that afternoon, the day before rifle opened. So, and that buck, I did a shoulder mount. He, rough scored just over 80 inches, like 80 and 7/8 or 81. And this buck is very, very close to that, very similar in its characteristics. So, but I'll make sure that you have a couple pics that you can kind of share and kind of show these two bucks. It's actually that was pre-beard too. So I had no beard in those photos. So you'll be able to like show me with no beard. So
I saw the pics because I knew you had been out there for roughly a week or so, or had been a week since you had gone out, and I thought, all right, well, I wanted to check in and see how it was going, and you were like, yep, I'm still working on it, hopefully get it done soon. And then it was the next day I got a picture of his balls. So classic photo from you. But then it wasn't long after that you sent me the hero shot. So yeah, I'm not the best judge of size, but to me, and based on looking at some of the other antelope that you've shot, I knew he was a good one. So
no, man, I was stoked, to be able to put it in and kind of have a storyline to it. I mean, I hunted almost every day, but I've got work obligations and stuff, and I'm able to to keep up with my work stuff. So it wasn't like at any given moment I waited for him to be in a position, waited to tell me what he normally wanted to do before I kind of moved in and made it happen. Let kind of everything kind of play out more than try to force anything, because I think these animals, their instincts, their defenses are, you're going to get lucky. You put 10 stocks on, you're going to have one where you might be able to get your bow drawn back, get the range, get everything worked out, and then you still got to make the shot. And a lot of times it's a long shot. But I shot this buck at 31 yards. He came through a fence. I've got video of his does coming through the fence too. I took some video on my phone, so I'll send that to you. So
yeah,
it's a pretty cool little deal. And I mean, to me, that's what it's about, the story, man. And I mean, in a perfect world, you walk over a ridge, he's standing there head down behind the bush, and you just shoot him, and it's the first time you've seen him or interacted with that animal. And I can say I saw this animal over a month before I was able to hunt him, and then I put together his pattern, and then I exercised that pattern against him and was able to capitalize on it. And it's that's, to me, I mean, the pursuit is what it's about. It all ends at the harvest, the kill, whatever you want to call it. But it's bittersweet, but at the same time, it's like when you put in the work and you've gone the distance with the animal, and you do that, it's fun. Public land hunting, man, there's other hunters, there's other people out there, and stuff like that. I mean, I had some guys kind of come over the top of me 2 days in a row, and it was frustrating, but at the same time, it's what exposed the pattern to me. Like, he ran up. I couldn't find him for, half the day. And then 5, 6 p.m. he'd pop up. I'd be like, he's in the same spot. And he's going to come back the same way and probably use that same crossing. I mean, I walked a mile of fence. I found 2 major crossings. And antelope are just like, a whitetail. They're habitual. They do the same thing. They don't migrate or roam near as bad as animals like elk. Elk will travel drainage after drainage after drainage, covering ground, and whitetails will too when the rut really gets going. But for the most part, they kind of stick to what they know. So,
Yeah, we've seen that a few times, out in the Western Plains where we've chased a group of mule deer around in circles and circles and circles. They just kind of keep coming. The does just kind of keep going back around. They want to stick to that core area, and then of course, the bucks aren't going to go anywhere. They're gonna stay right with them.
yep.
So, but speaking of, so last week you had talked about, you had made a really good point about people trying to be YouTube stars and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know particularly that that's the case in this area, but then you also had mentioned do things out in the field, like in a way that you want to be respectful of other hunters.
Yeah.
Don't let all those other things get in the way of being an upstanding hunter in the community. And so maybe you don't have to get super into detail, but I'm just curious about these guys that kind of went over the top of you. What was the situation, or what was going on there?
So, I mean, it's a public road. There's public land on both sides of the road. It's a mix of BLM, BMA, and state property. And BMA, for those that don't know, that's a block management area in Montana. So basically, you sign in, you can hunt private property, and anybody can do it, depending on the type of BMA it is. So, I'm a early morning guy. I got up real early almost every day, got out, and that's when these animals are on their feet. They're the most active, and the low light angles give you the best visibility. I mean, they pop in the mornings and the evenings. Because the way that the light reflects off. Antelope are a bright animal. They're white and tan, and they're out in the sage country or grass or willows, whatever it may be, and it's wide open. And so the one day I did communicate with these couple guys. I said, hey, I'm gonna they pulled up on the road while I'm glassing this buck. He's a ways off the road, and they're like, oh, are you gonna go after him? And I said, oh yeah, sure. And that was it. They didn't stop to chat anymore. They were like, oh, okay. And then they motored down the road, and I, obviously he can see where I'm standing or my truck is on the road. So I got up over the rise, and I'm like, well, kind of forces my hand. I try to be as less impactful as possible with animals I'm trying to hunt, because I want them to remain in their comfort zone. They're less on alert. And, after I said that, these guys kind of went in and tried to, they were dropping in. And I did later. I talked to these guys. I was pretty frustrated when I talked to them the second day. And he said, well, it was just in case they ran up that way or something. And I'm like, I get it. We're all out to try to fill our tags and stuff like that. But still, we're bow hunters, and bow hunting, you force it, you lose. Very, very seldom is forcing it work. And that works with rifle, and I think we were discussing before you started recording, but a rifle hunt, you come over a hill, an animal's at 300 yards, it's click, boom, you're done.
Right.
The hunt is over, and that's where the bow hunt starts. And I think it's important to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. I mean, I've had it happen in basins for elk. I've had it happen in the prairie for antelope. I've had it happen in mule deer country, everything. And, just, you got to give a bigger bubble, give more space. The guys that are successful typically will put the time in on every stock that are consistently killing. Like a 4-hour stock on an antelope is not unheard of for me. And, these guys want to hurry up and get to the next one before they're even finished with the one they're on. And that seems to never come out, in a positive light, because the defenses that these animals have are all working against you. They're evolved over thousands of years, and they pick up movement. I mean,
Right.
I'm not sure the exact amount, but I think pronghorn have like a 30-degree blind spot behind their head, and that's it. The way their eyes protrude out the side of their heads.
Right.
And I mean, how lucky do you have to be out of 360 degrees to land in that spot when you pop up and draw your bow and everything else? So,
Right. And they
um,
only have to turn their head a slight degree to cover that
yeah,
area. So,
exactly.
mhm.
So, but no, man, I mean, cherish the hunt for what it is, and enjoy it for the experience. And we all want to be successful, but you know, make sure you put yourself in the other person's shoes when you're decision making. I mean, if a car's pulled over, you don't have no clue where that guy is on a
Right.
road where you see some deer, some elk, some antelope, whatever it is. If that's the case, it seems like the closer to the road you stay, the more you get these people that are willing to just kind of fly by night and go over the top of you and stuff. But that's a positive to getting back or glassing areas you can't see from the road. And
Mhm.
the further back you get, the more opportunity to get a quality stock in without disruption is,
Mhm.
I feel like.
Right. And yeah, and we kind of talked about it a little bit before too, is, it's part of the challenge of hunting on public land,
Yeah.
but so as much as I hate the saying it, it kind of, it is what it is. But at the same time, again, I think it's important to get that message out. To me, it speaks to, inexperience probably, uh, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe these guys are, like you said, not seeing many opportunities and trying to capitalize on one and not really taking into consideration the other hunter, despite asking you, if you were going to go after
Yeah.
it, so it's
Well,
just, it's,
and you say that, and during the conversation with one of the guys that I had, like I said, I was very frustrated when I entered the conversation with both of the guys, and they were separate. One was on the road, and one was I actually walked out and talked to him in the field.
hmm
He was like 150 yards from where I'd been sitting all morning, and he didn't know that I was leaving to check on things to try to see if I could locate the buck to try to put more of that pattern together that I talked about. But
hmm
I I told him, I'm like, I mean, I would give you guys, basically, regardless of what side of the road I thought you were on, I would give you the whole thing just because I didn't know. I wouldn't want to step on your toes, and it's just, sometimes guys think it. And during that discussion, he said, "Well, these are the only antelope we've seen up this entire stretch of of drainage. I mean, the drainage is like 20, 25 miles long, and it's like, yeah, I understand that. Okay, so there's a lack of game because of the year we're having. It's kind of an odd year, um, but at the same time, that still doesn't make it right to disregard other hunters and kind of throw ethics out the door and stuff like that. So, I mean, I
right.
think it's important to put yourself in the other person's shoes. What if
Yeah.
he is over there? What if you know because if he's parked somewhere, and this goes for trailheads too. I mean, or basins. If you're dropping in from the top off a road, I mean, one basin that's 600 yards across. If a bull elk is bugling in that basin, guess what? Anybody that's in that basin can hear it.
hmm
There's a high likelihood. So then that creates a foot race to the animal, and nobody is successful.
Yeah.
So you know, if that's if you don't know, assume that they are. I guess I don't know. I mean,
hmm
I'm a get there early kind of guy, so
Yeah.
I won't say all the time, but most of the time I'm the first one in a particular spot
hmm
because I won't go over the top of people like that. And I mean, it happens to me almost every year, and it's frustrating, but it is also part of hunting public land.
hmm
So I think collectively, if everybody says I want to be the difference, I want to be the one that maybe allows that person to do what he wants to do. And granted, you're not going to always know where somebody's at or anything like that. You're going to
Right.
have interactions. There's more hunters in the woods, more hunters hunting public land than there ever has been, probably.
hmm Yeah.
It's become very popular, and the information that's out there is really really good. But you know, communication and just you know, taking the high road is what I always try to do. So
Yeah. For sure. And well said. And, so going back to the buck that you shot,
Yep.
walk us through a little bit about how that all went down.
So it's kind of funny because it was raining the day I shot him, heavily raining. So a lot of other people weren't out hunting. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a weird rain for August for the mountains, the prairie, wherever, Montana in general. We don't get those all day rains that time of year. And
Mm-hmm.
I had set some ambush locations on a fence crossing, and it's kind of funny. I was driving up, driving down, kind of checking out some stuff because because my last confirmed location was away from the spot where this buck liked to be.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Okay.
up on a dry section that didn't have any water, and he always came down. He liked to kind of hang out in this lower section along the road. So I knew he was up in the dry section the night before. I confirmed it. I get in the blind before first light. I'm sitting there, and it starts to rain like before 7 a.m. and it didn't stop raining. So I'm like, well, I'm going to wait till it slows down, and then I'm going to walk back the quarter mile to my truck and have lunch. And I'm like, that's probably not a smart idea because as soon as it stops raining, they're going to be moving around. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and I don't have rain gear. I don't have, I'm ill prepared in that regard, but I'm sitting in a blind. I mean, I'm not getting wet. So,
So quick question.
I,
So for the listeners,
mhm.
so the rain typically kind of holds them down. They typically will bed
I wouldn't
down, or what are
I
they?
wouldn't necessarily say that. I kept trying to think of what an antelope would be doing in the rain, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously if you bed down, you're going to get muddy and dirty and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's rained a substantial amount, and I thought,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, you know, I don't know. I think they just, I think their vision might be compromised slightly because they don't have the brim of a hat to block the raindrops, and they've got those giant eyeballs.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Yeah.
they're constantly getting hit by raindrops, they got to blink a lot more. And I think it weighs on them a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
and I think that might have come into my situation where I became successful too because of how it broke down. So I sat from before sunrise to about noon. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to get some food.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I walked back to the truck. By the time I got to the truck, I was soaked. I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive up and down. And the area that I was in was all socked in. It was all foggy. So you couldn't see more than about 500-600 yards anyway. So I
Mm-hmm.
can't check from the normal angles where I can see most of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And what I ended up doing was I drove up, and it was a weekend. I got in touch with some accounts that needed some stuff. I reached back out, answered some emails, put some orders in, did some stuff. And then I boogied back down um, to the spot where I was sitting after sitting up where I had service for a couple hours. So about 2 o'clock, 2:15, I come down and I get close to the blind, and then I can see little white butts on the hill about 200 yards up from the fence crossing. And here I am in my truck because the last thing I said to myself was, Ben, you're not gonna shoot that antelope sitting in the truck,
Right.
you know. So I mean, that's the advice I gave myself at that point in time. And I remember distinctly saying that. I'm like, I'm not going to kill him sitting up here,
Mm-hmm.
working. So I'm like, I got to get back in that blind. So I went
Mm-hmm.
down, and sure enough, they were there. And I kind of semi panicked. I was like, I think I said F bomb like 20 times, everything
Mm-hmm.
else. I pulled in my normal spot where I parked. And then I couldn't see the antelope. So I hopped out real quick, got my bow, got everything I needed, walked across the road, dropped down to cross the fence, and I look over and I can see them. They'd moved up on the hill enough to where I could see them, and I'm a quarter mile from the blind. It's
Mm-hmm.
in a low spot where there's some cover, and I brushed it in real good,
Mm-hmm.
and I just was like, oh, and I'm like, well, let's just see what they're gonna do, and it's pouring,
Mm-hmm.
no rain gear again, I'm getting wet,
And
and they
he
slowly,
hasn't spotted you at this point.
well, the does had. I
Okay.
mean, it's never the buck you worry about when he's got a pot of does. I mean, it's always the
Yeah.
does.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
the does did, and they soft bump up the hill, and there's about a 60-foot hill there, and then it goes over the top to the back side of a hill where there's a big bench,
Mm-hmm.
and they slowly went up the hill, and I didn't continue to move. I just kind of stayed by the road on the fence, and whatever. And there's cattle operations. There's always people moving around. They're moving cows. They're doing whatever. And they slowly worked their way up over the hill. There were 9 or 10 does, and then the buck. And he went up over the hill after a few minutes. And then as soon as he was out of sight, I'm dropping elevation down to the blind. So I'm even cutting the angle steeper. So it's not like they're going to pop into view again. And I get down there to the blind, and I'm working kind of my way into it. And I keep looking back up the ridge because now I'm looking at it from a 90-degree angle different than from the road. And there's a little gut that's behind the hill that I can see up. And I get about 20 yards from the blind, and I can see an antelope head. It was a doe. And I'm like, and I mean, after I got into the blind, I did make it into the blind without spooking her, but I ranged her. They were about 500 yards away. But still, antelope get antsy when you're that close.
Yeah. It's nuts.
And you're off like a major causeway, like a road or something like that. And I slowly worked my way over. And back to the rain thing, I think their vision is slightly compromised when it's raining like that. And I was able to kind of just slow walk over to the blind, got behind the blind. Then I jumped into the blind, and one of my windows is pointed right up that direction. And I'm constantly checking and glassing, and that doe hadn't moved. Still in the same spot, still looking my direction. And I'm like, well, what's she going to do? Did she see me? Is it a young doe? I'm only seeing one. The rest of them have to be there.
Right.
And then I look up. After a minute, I go back to check and look up the hill. And all I see is the top of her head and her ears in the same exact spot. So she had bedded down.
Okay.
And then I was like, wow, this might actually work, because I'm at the spot that they were on their way to before they went up the hill. And they want to come down because he's been in that high spot, that high dry piece this is going on, 24 hours now. He wants to get back down to the low piece where he likes to be. So, and it might not be him, it might be the does that want to be down there.
Right.
I see him, he's my target, but he's just following them around right now at this point.
Right.
So I sit out in the blind, I wait 2 hours, literally 2 hours, and then they start coming down the hill. They get up out of their beds, like same exact spot she bedded down in, she stood up. And then all of a sudden I could see like three or four turned into 8 or 9, and then the buck was with them, and they slowly worked down, and they came to the fence. They got to the fence. They kind of hit the wrong spot of the fence, and then one of the more matriarchal does made it over to where the right spot was, and she went under, and then her fawn went under, and then another one. And I got video of the first couple coming under, and I'll send you some video of that. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, the buck came through last, of course, and with a little bit of space between him and the does, so he immediately came through. And my plan wasn't to shoot him at the fence crossing. I wanted him to kind of come across and offer a better shot, because I figured he'd come through, because the fence crossing is pointed directly at me. So they come through, and it's like a frontal shot. And I didn't want to take that at 40 yards. So he turned after I hit full draw as soon as he made it under the fence. As soon as I saw his head dip, I drew back. And I'm like, I had placed a couple of sage bushes on the trail that they walked to get out into the open out of this little bottom. And in hopes that he would stop and maybe rub his, horns or his glands to scent mark that crossing a little bit. And he decided to scent mark right at the crossing. And he started coming across, and I had to pivot. I had 2 windows open that were kind of facing that direction. And when I pivoted, the grass is still dry in the blind because it's covered, and it made a little bit of I tore a bunch of the grass when I pivoted on my foot. And he heard that, and he stopped behind the only bush that was there. And these two sage bushes that I have, I ranged them. They're at 30 yards. So I used them as range reference and also as a potential place that he may stop on his own. And he stopped behind the only little willow bush that was there, and I could see the tops of his head. And he kind of started doing that. If you've ever seen antelope that are nervous about something, they kind of do this little high step, slow walk. Okay. And they're naturally curious. So he did that towards me, and I'm leaning out over the edge of the blind at full draw, and he clears the blind and he's still doing that step. And as soon as and having pre-ranged everything, as soon as my 30 hit right where it needed to, I cut the shot. And looking through a small opening or window in a blind, you don't get the same perspective as you would in the open. So I didn't
Right.
see the arrow flight. I'm shooting an orange fletch, so it's kind of the same color as the hair
Mm-hmm.
that's on their top half of their body, and I couldn't see the arrow. I heard the impact. I heard the thwack, the expandable opening, and I thought, okay, everything sounded good, but it's pouring, and not even 5 seconds, I got out of the blind, walk over, found my arrow. My arrow was in the dirt, covered in blood, but very quickly washing away. And like the first 10, 15 yards, there was blood, good blood. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but you could see it was diluting. It wasn't
Right.
like
Yeah.
normal blood spattering on something dry. And then he crossed some kind of open dirt, and then up a little rise on, across a little, creek ditch, and ran into the sage. And I walked up that hill, and at this point I'm following big muddy tracks from him running.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up to the top of that hill, and I could see the does about 200 yards away. They'd made it across the sage flat. So I glassed them, didn't see the buck. And then I just started taking one or two steps and then scanning. I don't see blood at this point because I'm probably 45 to a minute, maybe 2 minutes after I made the actual shot. And that blood with the rain is just dissipating so quickly.
Right. Yeah.
And I took about 3 steps into the sage flat, and then he was like 30 yards, not moving, completely motionless, dead. So, and I pinwheeled him. I mean, I hit him right in the 12. If you imagine a broadside antelope, like a Reinhardt, trophy buck, trophy antelope,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
right at the corner of the white.
Yeah.
And it exited like 3 ribs from the back,
Mm-hmm.
the last rib on the opposite side, because he was slightly quartering 2. When I gutted him, it would pinwheeled his first lung, the onside lung, and the offside lung. It like came out the back end of the lung, never
Okay.
popped the diaphragm or anything. So I mean, it was,
Oh.
and they have a huge heart lung area because they're runners, man. They're
Right.
built
Yeah.
like track stars. So,
That makes sense.
and he went, maybe 50 yards, and there was not a lick of life kicking or anything in him after the shot. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I shot
That's
him with
so
that
cool.
B3 Exodus, or no, B3 Exo 3
Mm-hmm.
head, 3 blade. It's like 1.5 inch diameter.
Mm-hmm.
It's a smaller cut. It's what I killed my elk with last year with my kids. That head has turned into a good head. I really, really like how that head works. So
Yeah, it looks pretty deadly. I was looking at him out at the ATA show this last year, and
yeah.
Hollywood's really been kind of drooling over him too. He bounces
Mm-hmm.
around, shoots all kinds of different broadheads, and plays around with
Yep.
stuff. And so I'd be interested in trying that out as well. But that's yeah, that picture you sent me had his balls in the picture, and then the broadhead, and what else was in the picture? Was it? I don't know. Maybe it was your
I think
bow.
that
I
was
can't
it.
remember.
No, there was no bow in that one.
But yeah, no, that's a really cool story. I like the way that it turned out. I mean, public land is, one aspect of it. You're dealing with other hunters. You were able to overcome that. The rain, everything that, there's a lot of things that had to come together for that to happen. And
Yeah.
so it's a really cool story. And then for it to be the buck that you've been watching all this time, and
Yeah.
it's just so exciting. And when you sent me that picture, I was like, check this out, honey. And I showed my wife right away, and she was like, oh, cool. And I was like, I don't think you quite understand the gravity of what's going on here.
Well, and antelope are one of those things where, like, 5 inches is like 50 inches on a deer. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
a 65-inch buck and a 75-inch buck, the 10-inch difference is like 100-inch deer and like a 160-inch deer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big difference. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot of ways to get an antelope to score big. And I mean, like mountain goats, I mean, like it's inches separate Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, and where it's a lot more in other species. So
Right. Right.
and honestly, I mean, I think I've said this before. Antelope are my favorite to eat.
Yeah.
Like, they are absolutely the best in my eyes from what I can hunt in Montana.
Mhm.
I really enjoy elk too, but
Mhm.
antelope just takes it for me. It's awesome, and my wife and kids are the same way. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And I think I know I've had it before, but I think it was like I think I had it at a wild game feed and it was like pulled. So it was like a
oh, okay,
pulled antelope, barbecue style. I don't know
sure,
if I've ever had just like a straight steak or a backstrap or
yeah,
anything like that, uh but yeah, I if if you're telling me it's good, it makes me really want to get out there and antelope hunt one of these days. I mean,
yeah,
maybe something that we have to talk about maybe one of these days, especially like more recently now, with getting the last episode with you on with getting photos and all that kind of stuff into the video portion of that. I've been kind of taking this walk down memory lane because I've got all the pictures pretty well organized like in a nice folder, but I always have a hard time finding it. So I found it this morning, and I've got all the pictures from 2006, 2007.
oh, no
There's a
kidding,
gap. I don't have anything for 2008, so I wonder maybe we didn't hunt that year or something. I can't remember. And then I've got uh, a couple more years after that. And so just going down this whole memory lane, it's like, man, I miss that. We had a lot of fun out there hunting, so we definitely got to try to set up a hunt one of these days. But that being said, going down memory lane and looking at all these photos, it helped me kind of realize a couple corrections that I have to make from the previous episode. There was a few holes in our story, and I just wanted to take a second to correct and clarify those. So I started working at Sportsman's Warehouse in the Fargo location, and I wanted to give credit to, I'm pretty sure you know both of these guys, but Eric Dunrud and Dave McMillan, because they kind of, Eric really kind of first got me into like serious into getting back into wanting to bow hunt again, and then
sure, sure,
kind of showing me a few things here and there. And then Dave had gone on a lot of hunts out west, and so I had a lot of conversations with him about that. And then I was only there for I don't even think a year, and then that's when I moved down to the Minneapolis area and started working at Coon Rapids, and then that's where basically those guys planted the seed, and then you just watered it. So um, and I did verify that it was 2006. That was the first year that you and I went out, and that was I didn't have a bow with me. I didn't have a tag, but that was when I went out with you and just kind of tagged along, and you kind of showed me the ropes, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait
So
till
the
next
first year
year.
we hunted together, did I come back from Montana? Because I moved out to Montana in the spring of '07.
Yep, you had to have because uh, yeah, because that first year that we hunted together was '07, and that's when I shot my first buck.
Okay,
Um, and I found that picture. I found those pictures too from that first buck that I shot. And then one mistake that I made too is I said that you were with me for my first and second mule deer, but it was actually my first and third, because the second mule deer I shot out there was that velvet buck, and that was in between. I was hunting, or
sure,
I went out early season with Cal
yeah,
that year. And then, so I filled my tag, and then we hightailed it back to Minnesota so that we could, because it was velvet, so we wanted to preserve the velvet. And then
yep.
we came back out and met you and Bill. So
Okay, yeah, we hunted late that year. Yep,
yeah, so I was with you guys, but I had already filled my tag, so I was just tagging along, and I
sure.
think I had found a really cool deadhead while I was out there, so that kind of made it worth it too. But so yeah, just going down and just getting reacquainted with kind of how that all went. And then lastly, we did talk briefly about the buck that you killed out there that we named Lefty. And part of the reason we named him, well, we named him Lefty because he had a little tiny fork on the left G2. And you had actually got, that was the first buck that I was within bow range of
Mm-hmm.
ever. And I screwed it up because I remember he was in a bed, and we got really close and got into a position where we were behind a tree, and then basically I just stood out and drew my bow, and he stood up, but he was facing directly away from me. And you're like, shoot, 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 shoot. You said it like, I don't know, you said it like 5 or 6 times, and then finally he took off, and you were like, dude,
No
why didn't you
patience for anything back then.
you were like, dude, why didn't you shoot? And I'm like, I just didn't feel like I had a good shot, when in all reality, it was probably, I could have made that shot happen. But either way, and it is kind of cool, because then later on, I think, I don't know if it was that same trip, or if we had gone out maybe a few weeks later or something like that. But that was the buck that you went way back and shot, and then packed it out by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Wait long before Cameron Haynes was doing all that stuff.
No, I think he was doing it back then.
I'm just but yeah, so that was the only one we talked about, and so I wanted to touch on some of that too, some of the success that you had out there. So I wanted you to try to see if you could recall some of the bucks that you put down out there in the Western Plains while we were hunting.
You know, I remember the ones we didn't kill, the big ones that we'd find that we wouldn't kill. That
Yep.
Big Boy, remember Big Boy?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Um,
I've
and
got some
then
pictures of him in his bed.
do you?
Yeah.
That big inline extra, and then there was that. You remember that buck that I called Sylvester?
Yep.
Like so.
Yep.
And
And
then
then
there was
there was one that he got in a fight with that we named Dolph.
yep,
Dolph Lundgren.
Sly and Dolph. Yep. No, man, that was some good times, but man, like you say, when you have a, a lot of experience doing something, and you look back at some of the stuff you did, and you're like, God, I was an idiot back then, And we would never run into anybody out there.
Right.
Never saw
Never.
any other hunters.
No.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been back to those areas for a number of years. I mean, obviously with the oil boom and everything like that, I mean, a lot of that country changed.
It did. Yeah, it did.
So,
Because I drew a tag in 2019, and I went out there, and I saw a good number of animals, but um, my standards were quite a bit higher at that point, and so I was really on the lookout for a good buck, and
yep.
I finally found one, but he was really hard to get to. I had to get some permission on private to access the area, because I had to go through private to get to the area that he was in, and you know how that goes too. You get into an area you've never explored before, and it looks completely different.
Never what you think it is, right?
Yeah, and I had no chance of finding him in there, but I tried. And but like you said, and I guess I didn't run into too many hunters, but a lot of the roads that we used to access got washed out, so getting in there is a little more difficult, and so there was a lot of that kind of stuff. But I would say one buck in particular that was really cool was the one that you shot when your dad was right there with you.
Yep.
That was a cool one. And in fact, I know I have photos of you holding the rack of that deer. And I know there was some other ones that your dad took, where it's me and you dragging the buck out, and I can't find those anywhere. So I don't know if you have those, but if you have it, if you could send it to me.
I'll look. I've got one big like driver that I think I put almost all my photos in. So I'll dig through that and remember.
Yeah, if you happen to find that one, send that one over. But yeah, man, we had some good times. We got to get out and do some more hunting again. Try to see if we can't do something. Kids are getting a little bit older too, so maybe we can get them involved. I don't know. But
yeah.
Somehow, some way, we got to make it work.
No, for sure. So,
yeah, but that's all I got. You got anything else?
I don't think so. No, man. It's always good to you forget about things,
Yeah.
And talking about them kind of brings back some of those. It pulls those memories out of the memory bank that you didn't think you remembered anything about until you start talking about them, and you're like, oh yeah, they're in there still. So that's cool.
Yeah, and what's neat about it too is I've got all this content that I've had over the years, and I've never really done anything with it, And
you were filming a bunch for a couple of years, weren't you?
I got some film, but not a lot, because I was using that Sony, or not Sony, the Canon GL8, which had tape.
And high 8 tape. Or whatever.
And so I think I have a bunch on tape, but I don't know where those tapes are, and I would have to transfer them over. And I've got some cell phone stuff, but man, back then the footage is awful. I mean, especially in low light, a lot of that footage is pretty much worthless. But either way, what excites me is getting this stuff kind of in a like collaborated into like a video, right? That we can just
Yeah.
access at any time instead of having to, because I always have to dig through, 4 or 5 external hard drives to find the stuff. And even though I have it organized, there's just so much content. It's hard. It's still difficult to find everything. So it'll be kind
Yeah.
of cool to have it all in one place. So looking forward to that. So yeah, if that's it, I guess, that brings us to the end of this episode. You can find us at the Range Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me, Ricky.Wayne80 on IG and Ricky W. Bruley on Facebook. And of course, like we said before with Ben, good luck. He's a mystery. You might be able to, if you're those 2 guys that are,
I mean, I'm on there, but I'm not on there.
Yeah.
Right?
I know you go on there and look at stuff and whatever. And that's, it's cool. It's, totally understand it. And, but yeah, you can look him up
It's just my full name, Ben Guttormson.
at Ben Guttormson on
Guttormson,
Instagram.
so.
Yeah. And you're probably on Facebook too, but, feel free to look them up if you want. And, again, please be sure to head over to the Vapor Trail YouTube page, subscribe, like, ding the bell for the notifications, and just give us some feedback, give us some comments, whatever you think. If there's anything you want to see or want to hear about. And once again, big thanks, Ben, for taking the time out of your day. Happy to
Absolutely.
see that you're in the home office now, and you'll be chowing down on some antelope, and I suppose probably getting ready for hunting elk here pretty soon.
Yeah, got a little less than 7 days for opener.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the cool story. Appreciate all of that. It's an awesome story, so I can't wait to get it out there. And with that, we're going to pack up our bows and arrows, and we're going to leave the range. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, Rick.
See ya. Vapor Trail is now offering an exclusive discount to the Range Podcast listeners. Enter promo code TRP15, that's TRP15, at checkout for 15% off VTX bowstrings and Vapor Trail and Stokerized branded t-shirts, hats, and other gear.
Heard it. Nice shot.
What in the hell went flying? And I think he cut the tube at the bottom.